thank you, the Order of Malta, and to Mission 89 for the invitation. And it's really my pleasure to be here on behalf of FIFA today to talk a little bit about what we do as the international governing body of world football. And it really speaks to a lot of what was mentioned by Kevin in his introduction about prevention work. And we look at this topic within our wider framework of human rights. And we work across multiple departments to try and primarily prevent the problem of trafficking within football, and of course working to find solutions when we can with the authorities. From our department's work, I work in the FIFA Safeguarding and Child Protection Department, and we do a lot of work primarily with our 211 member associations, or what you might be more familiar with knowing as football federations. So we work with them to ensure that they have safeguarding systems in place at national level to prevent all kinds of harm and abuse and exploitation within football. So not only a focus on trafficking, but on the wider issues that we just heard Michael speaking about. So prevention around sexual abuse and grooming, neglect, physical abuse, exploitation, and of course trafficking. So we do a lot of work, education and awareness raising with our 211 members to help them put these systems in place at national level, from grassroots to club level right up to the pro league games in their country. This is a huge part of the work that we do in the FIFA Safeguarding Department, but we also work very closely with our World Cup division to ensure that hosts of FIFA World Cups also take this consideration into account when hosting. For example, in preparation for 2026, we're working closely with the federal and state level governments and authorities and host cities across the USA, Mexico and Canada. They have already conducted at city level human rights risk assessment. So as John has said, as Michael had said, or Kevin, sorry, not just at the time of the event itself, but in advance, pre-planning, considering what are the potential risks, what are the potential worry areas when hosting a major event. So these human rights risk assessments across all host cities have already been conducted. And indeed, trafficking has been highlighted in the majority of cities as a potential risk and problem area for the hosting of the World Cup. So the host cities at the moment are in the process of developing their wider human rights strategies, which will address a number of human rights risks related to the hosting, including, of course, trafficking and what safeguarding measures need to be in place in the lead up to the World Cup, but also, of course, during competition time. This is something that's very much led by the host city authorities. So, for example, police, social services, child protection agencies, immigration offices. It's also something that's built into the hosting agreements with major industries, for example, the airline industries, the hotel industries, that they also have this as part of their processes when preparing to be a major host of the upcoming World Cup. We also, in our work as part of our prevention, we take into consideration risk assessing everything that we do and looking at the risk areas across the ecosystem of football, which, as you can imagine, is the world's biggest sport and has a huge footprint. What we have become aware of, thanks to the great work of Mission 89, is a very particular risk area around the role of football agents. And over the last years, the new FIFA football agents regulations have brought in new mandatory requirements to try and address the problem, first and foremost, of there being fake agents that promise young boys, as was highlighted, fake dreams to create a better life somewhere else, most often than not in a club in Europe. So we're really trying hard to tackle this problem. And we've been doing this in a number of ways. So, for example, the new FIFA agents regulations have a number of requirements. If, for example, you want to represent a minor in football, you have to go through a number of steps, through professional education, ongoing and continuous professional development, including education on safeguarding and anti-trafficking. You have to be registered as a FIFA agent, so your license made publicly available on the global database. This is a database that anybody could access. So if, for example, you are a parent and your child has been approached by a person claiming to be an agent, you can ask for their agent's card, you can scan the QR code, you can check it on the publicly available database to see if this person is in fact a legitimate agent that could represent your child. So these are some of the major new regulations that have come into force. Of course, we can do our best to regulate the industry, but there's always going to be criminals that try and exploit the industry, and that's where, of course, the role of the authorities come in to help sports to try and combat the problem. We do a lot of work, and we're about to embark on work to raise the bar when it comes to education and awareness raising on the role of football agents. And the examples that we've heard about promising young footballers, their dreams that may not be really met. Quite often they're dreams that seem too good to be true, and they often are. So we're in the preparation of a handbook, a very simplified, child-friendly parental handbook in several and multiple languages to give parents and young players very simple and easy to understand information about what they should know about in terms of their rights, but also what to do if they are approached by an agent or somebody claiming to be an agent, so that they understand what to do, how they can do checks and balances, how they can check on the system to see if they're legitimate, and also to understand what might be some red flags for them to be aware of, to think about what to do next and where to report. We're working across a number of departments at FIFA to see how we can tackle this, like I said, as part of our wider work on safeguarding and human rights. But of course it's an ongoing battle for us, as it is any sport.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was, maybe I will start with a question to Kathryn. So the work that FIFA has been doing has been very impressive in terms of looking recently at the agents, the football agents in particular. As a human rights barrister, it's always struck me that children should only be given into the hands of somebody who is authorised to take care of that child, where there is a system of accountability, and yet that isn't something that ordinarily takes place in the world when it comes to handing over children in the context of any sport. What thoughts do you have broader than perhaps the FIFA, scheme, which we've yet to see, how it operates in practice on this topic of registered and unregistered recruitment agents, and how precarious a child's life becomes when they're in the hands of someone who has no accountability at all. Thank you.
I mean, it's a great question, and I always go back to my motherly instincts when you think about a child being handed over to somebody else. And my child goes to creche, and you know that thankfully everybody that works in the creche has been vetted, they've been background checked, they've been trained, and you know that you're handing over your child in the care of somebody else for a few hours, and that they're in good hands. But this is unfortunately not always the place in other sectors, and certainly not in sport around the world. And I think if you look at the legal framework around football agents, it's clear that what FIFA can do to license and check the validity of a license of a football agent is one piece. However, they're still operating in a system at national level that makes them bound to national law. So if, for example, in a country it's not legal by law to, for example, have to undergo a background check, then this gives a gap in the system at national level for agents to operate. They still have to operate under FIFA rules and conditions, but there's gaps at the systems at national level if it's not mandatory by law by the government. So I think from this perspective, it makes me think of the importance of sports and governments working together, and that safeguarding systems or child protection systems that are in place at national level, that they need to meet with sports. They need to meet with sports to ensure that what laws are in place at national level apply to the operations and licensing of sports professionals, be they an agent or a football coach or whoever. The laws need to meet and match, and sports need to also be proactive in reaching out to them. But if those laws aren't in place, it leaves a huge gap for sports and for vulnerability to happen.
From Widows' Rights International. Actually, I'm sorry I came in late. I'm not sure if you covered this or not, but I wanted to ask about trafficking of women for forced prostitution in times of sports events. Wherever you have a large group of men, you always have a huge number of forced prostitution. And I mean, maybe we shouldn't even use the term forced prostitution, because some people would say that all prostitution is forced, but we know that in the World Cups you have a huge increase in the numbers of women who traffic. We know that for the World Cup in Germany, where prostitution is legalised, there were football fanzines who were advertising to punters that they could, part of their ticket price was a visit to a brothel. And what is FIFA and other organisations doing to prevent the trafficking of women for prostitution at sports events?
Exactly, and from our side, I had mentioned earlier that, for example, in the build-up to the next major World Cup, which of course is in 2026 in the USA and Canada, the risk assessing for this competition has already started. It's underway, and we've been working with the federal and state authorities and each of the host cities to undergo a complete human rights risk assessment to consider all the risk of harm that may occur in the lead up to and during the World Cup in 26. These host city level risk assessments have been concluded, and indeed trafficking and exploitation have been highlighted as a major concern for the host cities. So what the cities are now doing, they're in the process of developing human rights strategies to identify these risks that have been highlighted as seriously potential harm and high likelihood to happen. And the human rights strategies of the host cities are being led by the public authorities in each of the states. So, for example, the police, social services, child protection agencies, immigration. They're very much leading on this at host city level to already on in 2024, 2 years ahead of the event, to plan to address the risk, primarily for prevention, but of course to have or to expedite and to have the systems in place should there be an increase in cases. But hopefully, as Kevin highlighted, the aim is to prevent it from happening, and it's been identified in the risk assessments that have already been conducted for 26.
Thank you so much. Brilliant.